Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dalaran, and in today's video, we're gonna do a top 5 video of top 5 specs that I really hope Blizzard will take a second look at and maybe tries to fix them in the future. These are the specs in the game that I really do want to enjoy playing, and I enjoyed playing them way back in Legion, way back, maybe even Cataclysm, Warlords, Pandaria. There was an expansion where I actually enjoyed one of these specs at one point or another. And whatever happened in BFA, I've been waiting for some of the class changes, spec changes, and while Blizzard has done great with some specs, in particular, Demonology Warlocks feel pretty amazing, Marksman Hunter has definitely improved, and Windwalker Monks are pumping some big numbers right now in the game. But not all of them are perfect, and in this video, I just want to highlight the specs that I personally have some sort of an issue at some point of the game. Whether my issues lie with PvE, PvP, or maybe a little bit of both. We will first start this video off with the spec of Frost Death Knight. Now, the change of Frost DK from Legion into BFA was a very rough transition. I mean, I remember playing the spec even back in Cataclysm, where it was a complete glass cannon, massive damage, but you fell over pretty quickly. And whatever happened to it in BFA, I was really hopeful that the next raid tier would try to fix Frost Death Knights as best as possible. But they are still revolving around Frost Breath playstyle. What I remember about Frost Death Knight is the good old obliterates and just how much damage that did. When the spec was all about the big crits combined from your obliterate damage, maybe even more of a passive playstyle with your frost strikes, a lot of sustained damage but also very rampy bursts that you control any moment. But then you had talents outside of that, like Frost Breath, if you wanted that oomph in DPS for certain fights. If you want a more consistent playstyle, you picked some of the different talents, and it felt like it was more or less balanced. The current Death Knight that it sits right now is a battle for Azeroth revolves so heavily around Frost Breath playstyle, and most of the other talents don't really even come close to how much damage and performance Frost Breath allows you, that it feels like they might as well bake this ability into the playstyle of what a Frost DK is all about, so you can actually give some variety of different abilities and different talents you could choose from for the spec itself. I personally don't like this playstyle because I'm not a huge fan of throwing all these different cooldowns during your one big burst in the opener and then trying to replicate that every 2 minutes or so. I don't like the idea of a spec where you're kind of forced to put all your eggs in a single basket. So for me personally, I'm just not a huge fan. But I'm also very unhappy with how underwhelming other talent options feel. Let's say I want to go for a more fun, sustain your playstyle, and I want to buff the damage of my obliterates. I don't really want to play around Breath and Dragosum. So I go for Inexorable Assault, so my obliterates could get a little bit extra frost damage from time to time, especially if I stack it up before a fight. Then I have maybe Gathering Storm for more sustain, Avalanche because it combos together with Obliteration for extra frost damage for a more bursty playstyle. I think it would be kind of cool if I could actually play it and output decent numbers. The talents themselves are underwhelming because they don't perform nearly as powerful as Breath of Frost playstyle, but also what doesn't help the spec is there's a lot of poor value in some of the spec-specific traits. First of all, a lot of your spec-specific traits are very weak compared to some of the base traits that are in the game. And the same traits that you are running for your spec don't really offer you too many variety of gameplay. There's not a trait that buffs the damage of your obliterate to make it more bursty. There's traits that buff your frost strike damage. There's traits that buff your strength after you use massive cooldowns, which doesn't really help that much. It just feels like it's a little bit conjoined apart from each other, and it just doesn't quite synergize for what the spec could be. So I really hope in the future Blizzard takes a look at some of the traits that Frost Death Knight has, maybe even tune some of the talents to offer more variety and changes to some of the gameplay. Maybe a melee sustain focus playstyle, maybe the big old burst all out Frost Breath playstyle, but maybe more of a sustain, Inexorable Assault, Obliteration, playstyle around Obliterate Frost Death Knights. I would love for them to bring something like that back. Next spec on the list is going to be Subtlety Rogues. Now, before I get all the hate, I love me some Rogue, and all 3 specs are fun. All 3 offer different varieties and aspects to the game. And when I'm talking about Subtlety, I'm mostly talking about them in a PvE aspect, for raids as well as, most important one, dungeons. Subtlety used to be amazing in the last season because of the way that the spec played. The more enemies you had around you, the more single target damage you could output to a boss. So if you could pull extra adds that weren't really all that, I guess, aggressive, that weren't really all that game-changing, and you allowed Subtlety Rogues to build up insane counter points, the amount of sustained single pressure you could do to a boss was absolutely incredible. So Blizzard ended up nerfing it. Now, the spec didn't really gain anything back after that, and right now the playstyles you have for the spec is either a very powerful burst playstyle that doesn't have any sustain, or a very heavily sustained playstyle that doesn't really have as much burst, or a mix of both. It's great to see Subtlety being able to mix around different playstyles with different talents. There's a lot of options and a lot of playability, but in the end, the damage output for the spec itself just simply is not enough for the Season 2 of PvE, whether it is the Battle for Dalaran lore, or even the Raider IO. Now, the spec in PvP is amazing. The crowd control it offers is incredible, but I do have a very, very small gripe with the PvP for Subtlety. Don't get me wrong, I love the spec. I understand it's all about the crowd control, but anybody remember Subtlety for the first season of BFA? The amount of damage the Shadow Strikes and Eviscerates did, it just felt so satisfying to have a spec like Subtlety with the control that you had, but also the damage that it offered. Now, I would love to see Subtlety go back to the glory days of good, powerful, bursty, even one-shotty opener damage that it had. So this last one is more or less just my own opinion. I know that Subtlety is a great spec, and I do appreciate for what it does, but I do want it to do a bit more damage. Maybe I'm the only one. You guys let me know in the comments if you would love to see Subtlety go back to the good old days where it did incredibly powerful damage. The next spec on the list is going to be probably one of the most visually pleasing specs I have ever played, and one I really want to enjoy but I just can't get to, and that is Enhancement Shaman. I feel like Thrall as well as Zappy Boy have gotten everybody to at least try a Shaman. Most of us play an Elemental, but a few of us tried Enhancement. And while Enhancement is this powerful hunter, or at least I look at it as almost like a hunter or a pathfinder, summoning ghost wolves, hunted down its prey, bashing upside of the head with weapons, physical weapons, but infused with elements of lightning, thunder, as well as lava, and just absolute powerhouse. But something about Enhancement just always feels so clunky, and I cannot put my finger on it. Every time I try to enjoy the spec, there's always something that just finds so clunky. And I'm so frustrated because I really want to enjoy it, and I try so hard to play the specs as much as I can, get all the different traits, try the different builds. I even got myself a 410 weapon out of a Mythic Plus chest, and still, I cannot make the spec work. I feel like Enhancement started out pretty strong in Battle for Azeroth, mostly because the talents that you ran, which was really one-fits-all cookie-cutter build, were very powerful and very effective. It didn't give you a lot of variety to play with, but the talents themselves were great. Then Blizzard would decide to do is to nerf the powerful talents and buff the weaker ones. Which at first I thought, okay, that's a good idea. You'll give more variety to a lot of the Shaman players. You'll allow them a lot more different playstyles, different traits to be added as well that might shape and form your playstyle. And yes, you can actually play Shaman and enjoy it. You have two different playstyles. One of them is a Lava Lash playstyle. It is very RNG, it has random RNG procs, but the damage it put out can be crazy if it procs. Or if you decide you want to play a Storm Strike heavy playstyle, also very heavy on RNG, the back-to-back Storm Strikes can make for exceptionally powerful damage. But I think we all can see what the problem is with the spec. There's just so much RNG with it. Maybe that's why it feels so clunky, is because you feel like you got the hang of rotation, you got the Maelstrom building and spending and building and spending, and then all of a sudden the game just throws a bunch of this RNG at you and you're like, oh my god, just try to get through all of your procs, and now your whole playstyle of spending Maelstrom, building Maelstrom is just all over the place. There's just very little satisfaction from it. It feels like you're not really rewarded for playing the playstyle properly. It's more like you're waiting to get that sweet, juicy RNG reward. But I am somebody who plays Outlaw Rogue. I have plenty of RNG on my plate already. So adding a whole nother spec that is so heavy on RNG, I just don't feel like it's something that I currently can play right now. I really want to see Enhancement Shaman improve in the future. It is probably one of the most visually stunning looking specs in the game. The way that it looks in terms of its abilities and lightning shooting out all over the place and lava just flying everywhere. In some cases it looks better than Elemental. but I can never really figure out the proper playstyle. The RNG always keeps me on my toes, but not in a good way. And I guess I just want a little bit more consistency for the spec. The next spec on the list is going to be a Feral Druid. First of all, I have heard plenty of information that Feral is actually a really decent spec. Or so I hear, because I've never actually seen a Feral perform really well within raids or dungeons. Outside of duels, I don't really see a lot of Ferals. Maybe some in Battlegrounds, but nothing really competitive. Also, I heard that Ferals have really great single target for 1-to-1 boss fight. If it's just between the Feral and the boss, that's the only enemy you have to hit. The Feral is just gonna shred through them. Or so I heard, again, because you never see any Ferals ever. I mean, am I the only one who doesn't see Ferals at all? I do a lot of Mythic Pluses, I do a lot of raids. Sometimes I dive into random groups for heroics if, let's say, I need to get my ults done on stuff. A lot of boomies that I see, a lot of Resto Druids, and even some Bear Druids, but rarely do I ever see a Feral Druid. But we do see plenty of Feral Druids, mostly for 1v1 duels with their powerful blades and a powerful heal for PvP in a 1v1 situation. They can really whittle down their enemy while outliving them with powerful heals. So we do see Ferals, I just feel like the spec itself simply isn't well put together quite yet, compared to how it was, let's say, back in Legion. Back in Legion, Feral was the king of the jungle. I saw Ferals doing Mythic Plus keys. I saw Ferals doing raids and even topping the damage charts. I saw Ferals PvPing everywhere I went. I feel like Feral is due for some sort of a class rework or a spec rework, very similar to what Subtlety Rogues got way back in Legion. In Legion, Subtlety Rogue started out as a very sustain heavy playstyle, and then Blizzard went up and changed their playstyle completely to be more about eviscerate focus, big DFAs, and the spec went from feeling kind of clunky, kind of weird, to a very nice tight fit for a lot of players. So maybe there's something they could do with the Feral. Maybe they can play around with more bleeds. Maybe they can kind of tone down the bleeds, make it more about the big ferocious bite as a good portion of your damage. Maybe they can play around with the energy regeneration. Maybe they can give him a more sustained AoE playstyle. Maybe they can give him Instacast Cyclones back. There's a lot of things they can do with Ferals. But I think a lot of us can agree that Ferals are pretty rare. I mean, I think I see more Survival Hunters in my day-to-day life than I do Ferals, and Survival Hunters are already a rare breed. The last spec on today's list is going to be an Arcane Mage. Now, this spec has been a 2-button spec for the longest time, or at least a lot of people have been describing this spec as a 2-button spec since the days of Cataclysm. While Arcane Mages do not have the most variety of spells between Arcane Blast, Arcane Barrage, Arcane Missile, and Arcane Explosion, which are your 4 basic abilities to deal damage, the main playstyle around Arcane Mages revolves around their mana, a limited resource with unlimited potential. If an Arcane Mage decided they just want to burn all that mana and absolutely obliterate you, something that Frost Mages and Fire Mages simply can't do, Arcane Mages can utilize and sacrifice, convert all their mana into a very powerful nuke. And part of the playstyle is all about managing that mana, not running out of it, but also not overcapping on it. So you have a playstyle where you have a spending and then building, and spending and building of your mana. Making sure you have plenty of mana when you need the big burst, and making sure you have plenty of mana when you're waiting for your big burst. Going from Legion into BFA, in BFA the mana building and spending just doesn't feel quite as exciting, doesn't quite feel as satisfying. Hell, the whole playstyle around your mana management doesn't really reward you with a great feedback. Compared to Legion, the current mages of BFA just have so many less buttons to choose from in order to craft their playstyle. Hell, the more passive you can go in your talent tree, the better you'll do for great damage. Don't get me wrong, Arcanes are slamming right now in PvP, and they are great for player versus player, but that's not what I'm talking about. I want for Arcane Mage to feel powerful within a raid environment. I want to be able to manage my mana and get rewarded with powerful damage with more consistent playstyle. I want to be able to utilize all the different abilities you have back in the day, like Supernova an enemy for extreme burst reasons, or utilize an Arcane Orb maybe as a baseline ability in order to generate more Arcane charges, as that ability feels really fluid, and giving it up just feels worse, but you do more damage. And while we're at it, can we get the artifact weapon ability for Arcane Mages back? It was super fun to have to build up this powerful big burst of arcane power, just kind of in a massive AoE. You can kind of make a single target slash AoE playstyle where you build and build and build and bam, massive explosion happens to an enemy and everybody around them. I feel like there's so much potential with so much lore, with Jane of Armory being a very powerful, important character, even though she's a Frost Mage. Mages are at the forefront of BFA. Then we also had Khadgar for all of Legion. There's so much inspiration that could be drawn from some of those characters, from some of the spells that they cast. There's so much potential with Arcane Mage, and I feel like it just hasn't quite been realized yet. I really would want Blizzard to look at Arcane Mage yet again, because Frost and Fire feel pretty amazing to play, and when you have Frost and Fire feeling as good as they do, Arcane Mage just kind of feels like a third wheel, and I want to love this third wheel, but you get tired of pressing Arcane Blast over and over and over and over, and that, think about some of the other Arcane Mages that have been playing this spec since the beginning of the game. Anyway guys, these are the specs that I would want some changes to in BFA. Not exactly 100% guarantee if Blizzard is going to be making changes to any of the specs or not in the future. And in most cases, I don't want some crazy radical changes. I just want a developer to take a look at some of these specs and give them some love. Make them feel great. Make them feel powerful, make it feel fun and exciting to play. I want the specs to get to the point where somebody feels excited to log on and play 5 of those specs that are listed in this video, because the playstyles would just be so much better if someone were to just look at them for the concepts of Battle for Azeroth. But that's where I'll sign off for now. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I do hope you enjoyed. You guys let me know in your thoughts, comments below. Do you agree with my top 5 list of the specs that I would fix? And what would be your top 5 list of the specs that you would want to fix in the game? Let me know that in the comments below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see all of you in another video.